Meeting of the Commission to Study the History of the Uprooting of Black Communities by Public Institutions of Higher Education in the Commonwealth will come to order. At this time, I'm going to call roll. Delegate McQuinn.
Present.
Delegate Ward. Delegate Anthony.
Here.
Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Delegate Campbell. Delegate Tata.
Here.
Senator Locke. Senator Bagby. Senator Marsden.
Here.
Senator Diggs.
Here.
Cassandra Newby Alexander.
Present.
Dr. Byron Cherry.
Present.
Carl Edmonds. Peter Blake.
Here.
Julian Hayter. Joni Ivey.
Here.
Maureen Elgersman. Scott Fleming.
Here.
Deputy Secretary Kent.
Here.
All right, a quorum is present. The first order of business is going to be the election of a chair. So nominations are now in order for a chair of this commission.
I move that we nominate Delegate Dolores McQuinn as chair.
All right, is there a second?
I second the nomination.
Okay. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, the nominations are closed. All those in favor of electing Delegate McQuinn as chair of this commission, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, congratulations, Delegate McQuinn. I'm going to turn the election of the vice chair over to you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, before we move on, would like to call in nomination for the vice chair, please.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a nomination, and that would be Senator Lamont Bagby as vice chair of this commission.
Okay. The nomination has been made and properly second for the vice chair to be for this commission, Senator Lamont Bagby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that are opposed, there are none. Thank you so much. I want to thank you, first of all, for those who have nominated me to be chair of this commission. It is extremely, to me, exciting opportunity for us to dig deeper into the history of our Commonwealth and in terms of the universities and the relationships that had occurred over a period of time. But it's also an opportunity to revisit some of the things that have happened and occurred during a period that I guess most of us were not here. If we were very young in being here. But it was something that when you look at the kind of injustices that may have occurred as a result of some decisions I've made, it is almost, personally, I have an obligation, if I have an opportunity, to look into it and to say, ask the question, what has happened? And if we are, as a Commonwealth, as a governing body, do we have any obligation to help to bring about some changes in terms of what has happened? So the legislation that was put in the final budget, and it was unanimous support from my colleagues. And again, the purpose of the commission is to study and determine where any, this specifically public institution of higher education, their interaction with the community and those things that may have occurred at that time. And so thank you, each of you, for being here. Before we go on, I do want you to, even though it has been noted that you're here, if we would start actually on the from delegate to just share with us, Delegate Anthony, share with us, in terms of you being here and what are your expectations in terms as we move forward. Thank you, and we're going to go around the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Delegate Benita Anthony. I represent House District 92, which covers portions of Norfolk and the northern part of Chesapeake, which we call South Norfolk. I'm very interested in this topic simply because Norfolk historically has been the very core and center of redlining and displacement. And having spent 20 years in higher ed, this hits very home for me. So my expectations is for us to gather as much information as we can and to look at overarching policies that the General Assembly can put in place to make sure that we don't repeat history.
Thank you. Delegate Tater.
Hi, my name is Delegate Ann Farrell Tata. I represent the 99th District, which is the northeast part of Virginia Beach. I am very honored to be assigned to this commission. I don't have a lot of historical knowledge about the subject, but I'm always about righting wrongs. So I'm eager to learn and listen, and to the extent that we can right the wrongs, I'd love to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Tater. Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Senator Dave Marsden from the 35th District in Fairfax County. And one of the things about being as old as I am is that I went to school in segregated schools until my senior year in high school. Was when Fairfax County finally desegregated, and learning as I did, working for the county for 30 years as a juvenile probation officer, learning of the indignities, the prejudice, the bias, the lack of justice that the community in Fairfax received, and I assume in other parts of the Commonwealth as well, was quite an education. And it will be nice to put that to work here in this commission to lend that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Diggs.
Thank you. I'm Senator Danny Diggs, representing the 24th District, which is York, Poquoson, Williamsburg, parts of James City, and the city of Newport News. I'm also pleased to say that the city of Newport News and Christopher Newport University have already undertaken a study on this very topic, and they're making great progress. And I certainly look forward to learning about our history and how we got where we're at today and what we need to do about it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Delegate. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Delegate Karen Keyes-Gamarra from House District 7, which encompasses most of Reston, Oakton, and Herndon in Northern Virginia. I previously have been on the Fairfax County School Board, where we had quite a few discussions about history. And what I have come to understand is most people don't really understand how we got where we are, or how communities had been developing over time, particularly post-Reconstruction. I also have been a part of the Planning Commission and developing comprehensive, equitable comprehensive planning of communities is one of the ways that we can properly plan for the future. So my hope is to take this historical perspective and perhaps improve processes going forward so that we are much more aware of how we can serve our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go with the list because there are probably some faces that I am not familiar with. Please forgive me. So I'm going to call the name and then give you an opportunity. And those that I do know, I'll call their names as well first, probably. Mr. Peter Blake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Peter Blake. I am the interim president for the Commonwealth Alliance for Rural Colleges. Before that, I served as director of the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia. And I share a lot of the interesting concerns that we've already heard. I think also my many years, decades of work in higher education in Virginia also give me a little bit of perspective on these issues. And then, of course, growing up in Richmond, which has its own unusual, sometimes unsatisfying history, and that I was a history major when I was at VCU. So I can bring all of that perspective to this commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Appreciate that. Jody Ivey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am from Newport News, Virginia, and I am serving on the 6-member commission of Christopher Newport studying the same topic. And so I'm delighted to be a part of this panel, and I look forward to hearing great things on us.
So thank you so much. Dr. Cassandra Newby-Alexander.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm Cassandra Newby-Alexander, Professor of History at Norfolk State University and the Endowed Professor of Black History and Culture for Virginia. And I am really delighted that we have this particular commission. And the primary reason is because we need, in order to cease what the 20th century did in creating a very segregated, monolithic, racist society, we have to first acknowledge it. We have to document it. We have to ensure that our history is not interfered with by people who don't want to acknowledge that past and who try to hide it. Or my favorite phrase these days is invisibilize our past. We have to know and understand that past. That's the first and most important step. And my hope is that this commission will do that, plus it will do the second most important step, and that is to recommend what I call reparative justice. Because it's not enough to recognize harm. The next step has to be to heal. And healing doesn't just come from acknowledgement. It comes from actual steps to repair, because right now we're structurally still in a racist society. In Hampton Roads, and I'm a native of Norfolk, I live in Chesapeake now, our area still has the highest percentage of segregated housing in the country, not just in Virginia, in the country. And we still see disparities in funding, even though our area is the second largest producing area in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we have a lot of reparative work to do, and I hope that this commission can begin one important step in that, towards that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Newby-Alexander. And obviously, you all can see she does not have an opinion. I can say that to her. That's my good friend here. The next person I want, Dr. Byron Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Byron Cherry, born and raised in Norfolk. And also that name Tater. Are you related to Coach Tater? Yes. I went to Norway High School, great football coach. I was a track man myself. Anyway, I just had to say that. Graduate of Norfolk State. I spent 26 years in military, retired colonel. Last 15 years, I just recently retired in June 30th from a firm I started in Northern Virginia with cybersecurity and IT firms. So now I'm retired. So, but being on the board in Norfolk State for 7 years, the last 3 years I served as director. Everything that Cassandra said, because I worked with her a lot when I was on board at Norfolk State, I'm not going to repeat what she said, but I'll just say ditto to what she said. And currently right now I live in Woodbridge, Virginia, up in Northern Virginia. So again, I look forward to working with this committee and so forth. I'm not a stranger to committees. I've been on several committees within the state, and I look forward to working. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming and being a part of this. Julian Hater. Not here, okay. A. Scott Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sir.
I am Scott Fleming. I'm the director for the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia as of May of this year, so new. Some people have referred to me as the new Peter, and so I'm thrilled to see the old Scott down to my right. It is, I was curious and I looked this up on the way over, but Virginia has a notorious distinction of being the home for the slave trade in North America, dating back to on or about August 20th of 1619. And so I find it fitting that we are meeting today to try and begin to build some path forward for a better future. At Chev, we often refer to the transformative power of higher education, and in some cases that is used, in most cases, used positively. In some cases, as we've learned thanks to the reporting of ProPublica and WHRO, that hasn't always been the case. And so I am encouraged that we are having the conversation, and I am enthusiastic that we'll find some positive outcomes that will help the communities that have been impacted and that we can begin to build a future for all Virginians that will lead to a diversity of talent, both in the workforce and prosperity for all those who seek it. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being a part of this. Dr. Maureen Lee. Okay. Madam Secretary, or the designee.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Kent. I'm Deputy Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth, substituting for Secretary Amy Goodere, who unfortunately was not able to be here today due to an illness. I currently live in Hanover County, and prior to that lived in Fairfax County and Loudoun County, so bring a little bit different perspective throughout the state. I've worked in higher education for 2 decades, and I am really looking forward to this meaningful conversation. In my time in higher education, I have had the opportunities to see the evolution of post-secondary education institutions throughout the Commonwealth and the country, and the positive and challenging outcomes that they have brought to their local communities. So I do look forward to this meaningful conversation. I look forward to listening, to learning, and to participating in this important conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you again for being a part of this commission. Have I omitted anyone? Okay. All right. Thank you. Then we're going to move on to the third agenda item for the adoption of the virtual meeting policy by Ashley Benz from the Department of Legislative Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2, 3708.3 requires public bodies to adopt a policy regarding remote participation by members in all virtual meetings. So that's what we're going to do right now. You all can decide to what extent you want to adopt that policy, whether you want the full gamut of options that FOIA provides. I can run through those really quickly. FOIA provides that individual members of a public body may use remote participation instead of attending a public meeting in person, so long as in advance of the public meeting, the public body has adopted a policy, and the member notifies the public body chair of the reasoning why the member cannot attend the meeting. And the 4 reasons that are available to the member is: 1, the member has a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents the member's physical attendance at the meeting. A medical condition of a member of the member's family requires the member to provide care for that prevents the member's physical attendance, or the member is a caregiver who must provide care for a person with a disability at the time the public meeting is being held, thereby preventing the member's physical attendance at the meeting. The member's principal residence is more than 60 miles from the meeting location identified in the required meeting notice, or the member is unable to attend the meeting due to a personal matter, and they identify with specificity the nature of that personal matter. That last one, dealing with a personal matter, is limited to no more than 2 meetings per calendar year, or 25% of the meetings held per calendar year, rounded up to the next whole number, whichever is greater. Now, that is dealing with meetings that are held in person, but an individual member of the public body wants to participate remotely. There are also specific requirements that the FOIA laws institute dealing with what needs to go into meeting minutes if any of those 4 options are taken into consideration. If a member decides to use those, certain things need to go into the meeting minutes in those instances. Now, if a public body such as this one decides to hold an all virtual public meeting, meaning that all members are meeting completely virtually, there also needs to be a policy adopted by this body. The policy has to give an indication whether or not the meeting will be in person or all virtual in the actual meeting notice that goes out to the public. Public has to be provided access via electronic communication means. The public has to be able to hear all members during the meeting, and when audiovisual technology is available, they have to be able to see the members as well. A phone number or other live contact information has to be provided to alert the public body if audio or video transmission of the meeting provided by the public body fails. The public body has to monitor such designated means of communication during the meeting and has to take a recess until public access is restored if the transmission fails for the public. All meeting agendas and documents provided electronically to the public at the same time as the public body. The public has to be able to comment electronically. No more than 2 members in a remote location together unless it is also open to the public. You have to follow all closed session procedures as indicated by subsection D of 2.23712 of the Code of Virginia. And there can be all virtual meetings more than 2 times per calendar year or 50% of the meetings held per calendar year, rounded up to the next whole number or held consecutively with another all virtual public meeting. And lastly, the minutes that are taken have to include that the meeting was virtual, all virtual, and include the type of electronic communication means that the meeting was held by. Any all virtual public meeting or any participation by remote virtual public communication has to indicate that in the minutes, and it cannot be applied. It has to be applied strictly and uniformly without exception to the entire membership and without regard to the identity of a member requesting such remote participation or the matters that will be considered or voted on at the meeting. So with that said, that was a lot, I know. I guess my question for you all and Madam Chair is if you would like to, I guess most public bodies end up going for the full range of what FOIA allows. If any of that is something that you all would not like to allow, the policy can exclude that. But basically everything that I went over is the full gamut of what it does allow.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Benz. Are there any questions, first of all, from any of the, and let me say this, it's, based on what she has shared for most of us, it's pretty standard now, especially after the COVID situation, it became more hybrid under some circumstances to have these meetings that were hybrid so that we'll be able to accommodate everyone. And then the other piece is that we also have some very busy individuals who's being a part of this commission. And we really want to make sure that you're engaged. So we're giving every opportunity. I think the General Assembly, we voted on it to give people, opportunity to be a part of the meeting without necessarily physically being in that space. And so I guess, are there any questions? Someone said Madam Chair.
I said Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I move that the commission adopts the full gamut of the virtual meeting policy.
Okay. All right. The motion has been made and properly seconded that we would adopt what has been proposed by Mrs. Benz, the full gamut of this, of the process for meetings. It has been seconded. So all in favor say aye.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, it's a recorded vote.
All right. This is a recorded vote.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Delegate Anthony.
Aye.
Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Delegate Tata.
Aye.
Senator Marsden.
Aye.
Senator Diggs.
Aye.
Dr. Newby Alexander.
Aye.
Dr. Cherry. Mr. Blake.
Aye.
Ms. Ivy.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fleming.
Aye.
And Mr. Kent.
Aye.
It's unanimous, Madam Chair.
Okay. I don't know if I voted.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I was calling you last.
Aye.
All right. Now it's closed. It's unanimous.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your first vote. I appreciate that. We're going to move forward and now call for Julia Bergamini. Is that right? Okay. Would you please come and now give us an overview of House Bill 6001 for the 2024 special session? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. HB 6001 established the Commission to study the history of the uprooting of Black communities by public institutions of higher education in the Commonwealth pursuant to subsection U of item 1 of that bill, which provides that the Commission is established for the purpose of studying and determining whether any public institution of higher education in the Commonwealth has purchased, expropriated, or otherwise taken possession of property owned by any individual or entity within the boundaries of a community in which a majority of the residents are Black in order to establish or expand the institution's campus, and whether and what form of compensation or relief would be appropriate for any individual described in that first clause or any of his lineal descendants. Subdivision U of subsection U of item 1 went on to provide that in fulfilling the purpose of the Commission's duties are to consult with each public institution of higher education in the Commonwealth to determine whether that institution has purchased, expropriated, or otherwise taken possession of property owned by any individual within the boundaries of a community in which a majority of the residents are Black in order to establish or expand such institution's campus, to research whether acquisitions similar to those just described have occurred in other states, to analyze in conjunction with relevant public institution of higher education and such other stakeholders as the Commission deems appropriate, whether and what forms of compensation or relief would be appropriate for any individual described in that previous subdivision or any of his lineal descendants, and finally, to consult with such experts as the Commission deems appropriate to assist the Commission in carrying out these duties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions in terms of I guess, the duties of this commission? Certainly, it would be research, education, analyzing, all of the things that you all have basically said as we went around the room, to make certain that we are digging much deeper into, I guess, those. And I would say injustices, those that had occurred over a period of time, and for us to look at those things and in collaboration with the universities, and some of them have very well gotten started in looking themselves, doing their personal, I guess, investigation into how things were, how the universities were birthed, and then the expansion of some of those universities, and so expansion program. But it is an opportunity again for us to dig deeper into just much of the history of this Commonwealth, and how we can, again, bring about some level of repairing the damage that has been done to families. And all of those things will come through recommendations. I've been asked questions, well, what do you all expect to do? What are you looking to do? Are you going to do A, B, C, or D? And I really want us to have this opportunity with our duties being understood to make sure that everyone is involved. All of us are involved in the discussion, and in terms of recommendations as well. Where do we go from here once we have done our due diligence in terms of research and analyzing and investigating basically what has happened? Okay. Are there any questions or concerns or just commentary at this point? Okay, you guys are a great group. Thank you. Great group. Okay. Well, we don't need any kind of vote on this one part. No vote. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to move forward with a presentation from Brandi Kellam. This young lady, if you people are like, how did this get started? And I want to give Brandi just accolades for, on this, working so diligently to make sure that there's a public knowledge of what we're doing, basically. For this, any of us who are really of African American descent, okay, any of those who are descendants of African American communities, we've heard these things over the years. These are some of the table discussions possibly on Sunday, maybe on Saturday night. When you drive past certain places where your great-great-grandmother used to live there, and you're looking at these things and you're saying, well, why, what happened, why? And there was, often the response was always something that needed additional research into, families that, our families who had the history. And it was basically, a lot of it was oral history that was passed on. But when Brandi called me about this particular issue, and I shared with her under some circumstances that I'd heard about some other things that have gone on in the Commonwealth. But she really sparked so much interest to this particular issue, just about the way that she went, the ways that she addressed this particular issue and the information that went forward. Brandi is and I'm just going to give you a little history on her, and then her presentation will speak for itself. I am absolutely sure that she is an investigative journalist and documentary film director. She's a 2-time Emmy Award winner. Her reporting has brought critical issues to light across national news platforms, including her 2023 series and documentary, Uprooted, which sparked both local and national debates about racism and housing injustice. The series, which examines the displacement of Black communities by American colleges and universities, was based on Brandi's groundbreaking discovery of residence archive from a historic Black community in Newport News, Virginia. Produced in collaboration with ProPolitical and the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO, the series detailed how cities and colleges officials systematically destroyed the community starting in the 1960s by seizing over 60 acres of land to establish a permanent campus for Christopher Newport University, Uprooted. Further explores how American colleges and universities in Virginia and nationwide adopted similar practices driven by federal policies that prioritize higher education expansion over well-being of surrounding Black and brown neighborhoods. The series has received several accolades, including a Gracie Award, Columbia University, Topeka Prize, the Education Writers Association, and Brandi's first regional Emmy as a documentary filmmaker. In 2021, Brandi received a reporting grant from Columbia University, the Ira A. Lipman Center for Journalism and Civil and Human Rights, where she has focused on housing inequality in Newport News, Virginia. She has taught graduate-level journalism courses on multimedia storytelling at the S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communication at Syracuse University, where she earned a master's degree in broadcast and digital journalism. A Virginia native, she also holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. At this time, we welcome Brandi Kellam, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for that introduction. First, I want to make sure I have a presentation here that I want to present. So can everyone see okay, there you go. All right. But first, I just want to break character just for a second because, just being in this room is extremely significant, right? As journalists, we cover communities and we cover issues that matter to them, and we dream of our reporting being examined in this way that could potentially create legislation or address these injustices, specifically for this commission, Black communities in Virginia that were displaced and erased by public colleges and universities in the state. And so I just wanted to say I am very grateful to be here. I'm very appreciative. Thank you so much, Delegate and now Chair Dolores McQuinn, for inviting me. And so I just wanted to take this time to present to you some of the reporting, and then maybe delve into a little bit of the research, as you all might have some of these considerations when you are looking into this issue. And then just like a little overarching takeaway from what the reporting was and what we learned from everything. So I'm now going to start the presentation. Just give me a second. I'm going to open up my notes. Okay. And make sure I speak into the microphone. Okay, so as I said, I'm here today to present to you all reporting from Uprooted. It was a ProPublica and Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO investigative series. And as Delegate McQuinn mentioned in my bio, I am an investigative journalist and reporter in Virginia. I was the lead investigative journalist on this series, as well as the film director for the documentary that also accompanied the reporting that we did for Uprooted. So just a quick table of contents so you all can follow where I'm going with this. Just going to give a little background, talk about how the story was discovered, highlight a few Virginia colleges that we explored in the reporting, some central themes that we discovered, and then some research and takeaways. So this is just a quick little bit about me. I'm not going to get into my bio because that was already read, but I am from Virginia. I was born and raised here on the south side from Chesapeake, Virginia. I know a couple members here are from that area, Hampton Roads. And before working on this story, I was working in national news. I had covered a lot of stories of national significance. And it just sort of led me on this journey to wondering what I could do in bringing that experience to the state of Virginia. So I discovered this story and it brought me back here to Virginia. And I think this has been an ongoing investigation for the last 3 or 4 years. So I've been here back for a while covering this topic. And then as Delegate McQuinn mentioned, we also, as a series with ProPublica and the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism, the story that I discovered in Virginia became what you see here, which is a wealth of stories, information that had never really fully been publicly disclosed or uncovered about this neighborhood in Newport News, Virginia, that was erased by what is now Christopher Newport University, and then how other colleges across the state have done the same thing. In addition to some of the reporting challenges that we had, getting access to FOIA documents and public records, as well as the larger issue of how this manifests in present day or materializes in present day, with Christopher Newport as an example being a campus that, while erasing a Black community, also erased Black students and professors on campus through policies that pretty much eliminated their access to teaching and educational opportunities. And I have this QR code on the right just for technology purposes. You can scan that with your phone and it'll take you to the whole series. So let's just get a little bit into the discovery. As I mentioned, I came back to Virginia in 2021. And I'm getting into this because this kind of explains why this story is even a story today. As was said earlier, these are conversations that happen around the kitchen table for a lot of Black families in Virginia and beyond, to be quite honest. And for me, I'd never even heard of what happened to the community where Christopher Newport exists today, even being from here. And so to learn what happened, it was sort of like a shocking discovery for me to know that I never knew about that. And it led me to explore what else did I know about this story. given it was such a significant event to these residents in the 1950s and 60s. But not only that, what I also discovered was that there were still 5 residents still living on that footprint. So to me, that meant there was something there that needed to be explored. And so essentially, I had talking to a professor at the college. The story goes, I spoke to a professor at the college. He told me about his research, and I asked him if he felt like he had missed anything, and he said he hadn't talked to the families that were impacted because he felt he had an inclination that they were no longer there, which was contrary to what I discovered because there were still 5 families there. And that pretty much led to what you see here, which is a wealth of material from one family and other members of that community about the demise of their neighborhood from when it was thriving to where it is today. So this imagery is important to show because as you can imagine, as someone that didn't know about the history of the community, to now see all this in front of me and for you all to see this in front of you, it just goes to show that, number one, the community and the families there, this is really important to them. This really impacted them, and in some ways, it traumatized them because of what happened to their communities, which was pretty much out of their control. They felt like they did not have the resources that were helpful in order for them to navigate this. And they felt like they were pretty much ignored. And one of the families, James Johnson, who I have to give a huge amount of credit for even having saved this with no one outside of the community even knowing that some of these documents existed for over 60 years of material that he collected and organized. It is because of him that we are here today. And so I just showed this to put you in the shoes of the people who experienced what was said as an injustice to their community. I actually wanted to point out, what's interesting on this slide is that you see this from the perspective of not just local government playing a role in this, but you see where you see the council votes 5-2, that's a local government decision. Then you see, like on the left side of your screen, the college seeking approval to expand, which is a university-led initiative. And then under that, you see a little snippet from a letter we found from the Office of Attorney General from the Commonwealth of Virginia, which was working on behalf of the college to condemn property. So this is not just a local Newport News issue. This is not just a city council issue. This is not just a college issue. This is a collective, systemic dismantling of a community by several parties in power across the state of Virginia. So I went over the timeline here. This is just for your reference for later, but essentially what happened in Newport News, which was the launching point of our investigation, is in the 1960s, the Black community wanted to grow. They were targeted by white city officials. Despite having cheaper options available, they seized 60 acres from the Black neighborhood. Over the next couple years, ensuing decade, the college quietly began discussing a second larger expansion. Quietly is a very key word there because this was unknown to the residents at that time. In the 1980s, the college attained state approval to extend the campus boundary. So the remaining homeowners, some of them sued in a federal lawsuit. The case was dismissed, so they lost that effort to save the community. And then following that dismissal, this is where it gets interesting in terms of how this trickled down into where we are today. University officials, including former President Paul Tribble, who was the longest serving president of Christopher Newport University, promised not to negotiate with owners unless they approached them first and promised not to invoke eminent domain. However, our reporting found that some of that was actually not the case, that residents were pressured. They felt pressured to sell because they were approached by university officials. And as you saw in that previous slide, that in recent years, as early as the 2000s, that the state worked on behalf of the college to seize more properties by eminent domain. The college also did their own exploration of eminent domain. And today, in 2024, there's still just only 5 homes from that Black community that remain. So this is just a quick overview of how this looked across the state at the 3 colleges that we looked at in our investigation. Of course, Christopher Newport was a launching point, so we've already went over that issue, Old Dominion University displaced a thriving Black middle-class community called Lambert's Point. It was leveled in the 60s and 70s for what was also a branch college of William & Mary, because Christopher Newport was also a branch college of William & Mary at the time as well. And a lot of residents were displaced there, at least 150 families, 140 buildings that covered 40 acres. University of Virginia actually wiped out an entire Black community called Vinegar Hill. It was a thriving Black community as well, and it had been a generational community, so that community was even, some would say, older than some of the other two communities in the examples above. So I'm not going to read all of this, but the central themes here I'll highlight. The central themes we found in this investigation, we looked at Christopher Newport and the colleges that we explored in Virginia, is that one, these were thriving communities. So urban renewal was used, and eminent domain was the tool to seize homes from families. And as you may know, urban renewal is it is portrayed as a tool to revitalize dilapidated communities. Blight was a very popular term used in the 1950s and 60s. But as you can see, based on the research that and the reporting that was done in Uprooted, these were actually thriving Black communities. In Newport News example, they were actually looking to expand and build more middle-class neighborhoods. There was even a NASA engineer in that community. And for history's sake, because I would love to just drop a little history note here, if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, he worked with Katherine Johnson. So there were these thriving communities. There was resident pushback. A lot of times, that part of the narrative isn't really made prominent, but it was something that we discovered in our reporting, and we wanted to make sure that was especially known about the fight that these residents engaged in to save their community. So there was strong resident pushback. And then a lot of these residents were offered less than what their properties were valued at. In Newport, you see the last paragraph here says Newport News paid them 20% less than what their properties were valued. And then former residents of the Lambert's Point community, they also believe that they were not paid a fair price. So those were the kind of the three central themes that we uncovered in the series reporting. And this here kind of brings us to present day, because not only was this done in the 1950s and 60s, but another major revelation from this series was that this extended into today. So not just in the 1950s and 60s, but the 1970s, the 1980s, even the 90s, and up until the early 2000s. As you can see, the playbook pretty much was take some of the community and then expand out to take the rest of it. Whether that was intentional or not, we may never know, but that is the playbook that exists here based off of what the reporting shows. And what was shocking to me coming into this reporting was that that a taking in the 1960s could be impacting residents who still live on a campus today, on a campus that was once their community, and that even in the early 2000s, eminent domain was a tool that these colleges used to try and take these properties. Oh, wait, I actually want to go back to this really quickly. So on the right side of your screen, I love to show proof of reporting. So on the right side of your screen, you see there was a resolution by the Board of Visitors at Christopher Newport University during the early years of President Paul Tribble's tenure that shows that, A, they were seeking to negotiate sales with residents, that 2, they claimed that they negotiated these in good faith, but because they failed to reach a failed settlement, the board voted to approve the president, Tribble at the time, of exploring or directing whatever actions necessary, by words here, whatever actions are necessary to acquire the following properties by eminent domain. So that's like visual documentation of this happening even as early or as recent as the 2000s. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the research. This photo here is a photo that we took at Mr. Johnson's dining room table. it shows the length at which he went through to document his community and the demise of his community. Not to paraphrase what he said to me, not because he expected someone to discover it one day, but that he wanted people to remember what the community was about. So, I think he intentionally, initially he intended on just passing this down because, he's not sure if he can even pass his home down that he lives in right now to his descendants. So at best, he could document with photos, newspapers, land records, all kinds of documents that he's just been holding on to save some memory of a community that he loved, that it used to exist. So here I wanted to get into, I said earlier we're going to talk about some of the challenges. I picked these particular challenges because I do think that this is also speaking to some of the systemic issues and even conducting research in the state of Virginia. And I thought that may be of interest to you all as members of this commission and also as some members of the legislature in Virginia. So number one, what was surprising in the research that was done to explore how properties were acquired, that I discovered that and this is just for Newport News because obviously this is our case example, but that in the city of Newport News, historical property data is pretty much overridden on their website, on their real estate assessor website and their mapping, their GIS mapping site once that data changes or evolves into a different description. So pretty much what that means is that there's no way of keeping historical data outside of whatever deeds might exist. But it's basically like someone did all the work to create a map that then once that map was updated for any particular reason, the map that it was initially created is no longer, like the technology around that no longer is existing. So I'll show you an image of that in a second to help you wrap your head around what I'm actually saying. And then separately, this has actually been an issue that has come up not just with me, but with other reporters in the Commonwealth over years of reporting and trying to examine decisions made by colleges across the Commonwealth. But there's a FOIA exemption that you all are probably already aware of, that presidential papers from colleges and universities and working papers and correspondence are exempt from disclosure. And obviously, you know that what that means is that the colleges could provide that, but they have the opportunity or option not to. And I will show you an example of what that looks like from the research that we did covering Christopher Newport University. But the implications for that is that given that, the former president of the college had a lot of influence over the expansion, we weren't even able to access any correspondence as minute as collaboration or university announcements to explore and create a better timeline or more thorough timeline of how in later years the college approached acquiring land from these residents. The last thing that was interesting when we first started our investigation is that when we went to Christopher Newport, which is again a public institution, to access archives from their library, we were told we needed permission from the librarian to access those documents. And that is not just something I've experienced. I talked to someone recently who is also doing research, who actually is a student at the college who also experienced the same thing. I mean, they were able to access those documents, but this kind of speaks to the larger question of why would one need permission to access archived documents at a public college and university, at a library? So here is an example, a visual example of what I mean by data is no longer accessible on the website when it is changed. So this is a snippet of a map overlooking Christopher Newport University. As you can see in the highlighted blue, there is an address that references, which is 236 Prince Drew Road. Historically speaking and factually speaking, 236 Prince Drew Road does not encompass all that is in that rectangle. It actually only encompasses a corner of what's in that rectangle over to the left of your screen. And so pretty much what this means is that once the rest of those parcels that existed, which roughly estimating probably was about 10 to 15 or more homes, probably more than that, once they were all acquired, they were merged into one parcel. So now if you were to look at the historical acquisition sales, assessments of that property, and you were seeking to do that research using this mapping tool and using the real estate assessor's website, you cannot do that. You would literally have to do the work that someone already had done before this, if this had been stored, to then go and redo that research and create something like that for yourself. Separately, this is the FOIA exemption that I had mentioned earlier. I highlighted where it says presidents or other chief executive officers of any public institution of higher education in the Commonwealth are exempt from having their working papers and correspondence disclosed. Our reporting showed that this is pretty significant for Virginia because most states do not specifically language their FOIA exemption this way. There are some protections for universities and university officials and other language, but specifically to denote that presidents and other chief executive officers of public institutions of higher education are exempt from having to disclose these papers is pretty unique, and it's pretty unique to the state of Virginia. On the right side of your screen, you will see that this is a letter I received from a FOIA officer at Christopher Newport that I excerpted, showing some of the materials that were withheld from us when we were seeking to explore some of the decisions that were made by former President Tribble. You can read this for yourself, but, university updates to the Board of Visitors. Also, by the way, this was in a box of materials that were from Board of Visitor meetings, which are also public meetings, right? So we weren't able to access. Also worth noting, these were documents that were dated, that were in existence or have been created between the late 90s and early 2000s. So this exemption goes far beyond current considerations of what presidents are looking at or considering. This is such a blanket exemption that it made it difficult for us to even see decisions that were made in like 1994. Finally, I wanted to just leave you all with some final notes and takeaways from the research and the subject experts that we spoke with and featured in Uprooted. This image is an image of a church that existed on adjacent to the campus of Christopher Newport University that was also moved to a different location in Newport News for expansion efforts for the Department of Transportation in Virginia as well as for the college. Okay, so a few takeaways here just to kind of highlight what I have here. One of the takeaways from this investigation is that, as mentioned, these remaining residents, like the Johnsons, who still live or are hanging on to their homes in these communities, are still kind of left in the dark on what that means for them in terms of living out the rest of their lives or passing down their homes to their descendants. These are excerpts from the reporting, directly from the reporting that we did for Uprooted. And that is the sentiment that rang very clearly for this community in Newport News, the residents that are still remaining, but it actually speaks to a larger question of why don't they know what will become of their homes while they are still living in their homes. History and narrative, this kind of speaks to why this story exists. As I mentioned at the beginning, it was a discovery that was shocking for me because I had not known about the history of the college and the displacement of those property members that lived off of Shoe Lane, and to mention other streets, Moores Lane, Prince Drew Road, and Warwick Boulevard, to represent the community collectively. But the acknowledgement of that is, in their opinion, very minimal and overlooks the actual harm done to them by not just local government, but the college itself, as well as their fight to save the community. So that narrative, because of our reporting, is now more public. But as you will probably discover in your research, there's so many stories that have not been told. And then finally, repair. I wanted to leave you all with something that was shared with us with an expert that we interviewed for this, who's also a great resource for exploring this issue, DeVarian Baldwin. He's a professor at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. He has a book about this and the overarching impact of how universities are, in his own words, plundering our cities. And he acknowledged in his analysis that, these colleges are, in some ways, helpful to the economy of these cities, right? And that that is important to understand. But also, what is important to understand is that the prosperity and greatness that has come, with the profound cost to those host communities where they sit, and that must be accounted for and that must be repaired. And so what I wanted to leave you with is this image, which is an image of a house on Prince Street Road, which still is there today. It is one of the 5 houses that exists on what is now the campus of Christopher Newport University. And these residents don't even have a real driveway. In order to access their house, they drive through a parking lot on campus, up a dirt path, and as you can see, their cars are even parked on grass. Right behind them is some sorority and fraternity housing, and what you can't see to the left of the screen is some residential dorms. So with that being said, thank you so much for your time, and I left my contact information at the bottom of this presentation if you all have any questions for me.
Okay, Brent, excuse me. Okay.
Yep, I'm sorry.
Yep, what?
Madam Chair, I was just going to ask the presenter, how can we get a copy of the presentation? I know you had a barcode, but I was trying to...
Yes, I will make sure to give it to the appropriate person here to make sure it's distributed across the commission.
Ms. Kellam, listen, we want to extend to you a thank you, just a profound thank you for the presentation that you have made and the insight that I hope that each of us gain, even as much as we have had conversations. And I know there are individuals actually on the commission, on the task force maybe for Christopher Newport, but it has been certainly an eye-opener for some of us in terms of what you have shared with us today. Again, you hear these stories, you know about some things that have happened, but you certainly brought it to us in a way that is very detailed, and help us to understand the magnitude of what has happened. And I think you have given us some tools and information that would help us as we move forward in pursuing, the work of this commission. So certainly want to thank you for that. What we're going to do next, I think for the commissioners, we're going to open it up for any discussion, any questions to Mrs. Kellam. She has agreed to help us, assist us in that. And anyone else that may be, that have something that they wanted to share. Now, I did want Ms. Ivy. Ms. Ivy is sitting on is it the board or a task force or, okay, for Christopher Newport. And I am sure that if I'm sure that the rest of us don't mind, if you would like to say something first and give us a little bit insight. But the thing about it is this whole issue is not just Christopher Newport. That's the, this has, been across this nation, this has happened. And I'm hoping that as Virginians, that we could, and General Assembly, that we could say, you know what, we are ready to take on the challenges. We are ready to stand in the face of this and address it. How we do that, it is yet to be determined, because it will require all of the, require this commission to be very engaged in helping us to move in a direction that we think that we have served the families well and the universities well. So at this time, if there's anyone, again, that have any question, any comment, please, we open the door for that. Ms. Ivy, we're still going to be okay after I called your name first, right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am sitting on the task force, and I am quite familiar with your work because I've been studying it. We had our first meeting in April, and we realized that we don't have a solution, and we can't not rush this. So we've been busy listening to some experts, including Dr. Cassandra Newby-Alexander, addressed our task force. We're having to get educated on the entire situation. So, and unfortunately, that does not make the residents happy because it seems as if we're quiet, but we're working deeply to get knowledgeable about the information. I'm in a unique situation because I have lifetime friends who live this. In fact, one of my best friends is probably the house I'm having trouble seeing is probably the house on campus that is there, and I know how that family feels, but I think the commission was charged by the Newport News City Council. We have 3 people that the council appointed to the commission and 3 people from Christopher Newport. And I think while most people feel nothing has been done, I think the new people on council and we have a new president, they are opening to listening and giving people an opportunity to air their grievances. I feel confident that this group that's at the table now, and when I say group, because the commission, we can't guarantee anything, but I think that the council and the administration are committed to trying to find a way to address what happened to these families. I mean, we are looking back at city council records from the 50s, and some of the language in some of those letters are astonishing and would not surprise you. But unfortunately, it's like Dr. Alexander Newby said, you got to peel back what happened before you can go forward. So that's the state that we're in right now. We are trying to look at every document, every deed that happened from the 40s all the way up. And so I think we're going to be at this for a long time. Not too long, but we have to get it right, because if we don't, 10 years from now will be the same.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Ivy. And I do want to, since you brought it up, and I do want to share that the president, your president, and I had several conversations and representation from Christopher Newport as well. And I couldn't find anyone who would be more willing to and open to looking at this particular issue and having a sensitivity to what has happened and desiring to get to a place where you feel like that Christopher Newport has certainly addressed it, heard it, addressed the issue in a way that, again, that these families, that will bring some level of wholeness to these families. One of the things, and I didn't say earlier, and you didn't mention, I was waiting for you to say the word, but you know, someone might ask, what is the harm? You know, what was the harm that was done? And I have said on many occasions, the land was one way that African Americans were able to gain wealth, generational wealth, to pass on from one generation to another. And even those who were able to purchase land, to have land, the amount of work that went into it and the pennies that were put in jars and under the mattress and you name it to get resources to be able to go and purchase land. And they were always in mind, how would this serve the next generation? You know, they didn't do it saying, this is for me. It was always a thought that the next generation will have something that I could pass on. And so that's what was one of the major issue in this particular situation, the generation wealth that we lost as families across this nation. And so that's why it's so important, again, to help address this issue. Are there any other questions? And please go on and speak. Oh, I know Dr. Cassandra Newby-Alexander, but there may be some that I don't know your name. And I don't know about this system here. Your light is on. Okay, all right. We're going to, all right, Dr. Newby-Alexander, then we'll go to you next. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Brandi, thank you for, yet again, an incredible presentation and research. Your determination is, to say commendable, is such an understatement. You mentioned that our laws here in Virginia, and I'm going to use my favorite word again, helps to invisibilize this past. And I hope that the legislative representatives here will take a look at this, because as long as you hide the truth, you can lie about the truth, and you can prohibit real remediation and reparative justice from happening. And so it's my hope that what is supposed to be public information will be made public, will be allowable. So that is my hope. That's one. Two, there are things happening right now that are continuing this process here in the Commonwealth. And it's not just with majority white institutions, but also majority Black institutions. And so I wanted to know what next steps you're taking to continue this particular story.
Thank you for your question. And also thank you, Ms. Ivy, for your comments as well. And so for me, I'm not going to stop at this one investigation, obviously. Like I said earlier, there are more stories to be told. I'm seeking to uncover those stories and also follow what is the result of the revelations, right? So following what colleges are doing to address it, following what this commission is doing to address it, following that very closely. And at the heart of my reporting is pretty much, it's very simple. It's just to get to the truth of the matter, right? I'm a reporter. I come to this from a very objective standpoint, but as a Black woman from the state of Virginia, I also understand this issue is very significant. And so my plan is just to continue simply just to continue following it and holding parties that were responsible accountable.
Thank you. Delegate Karen, she has spoken, then I'll have you next.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much. I have spent a number of years trying to make sure, to the extent that we could share the story of how this nation came to be. And I think that what you're doing is extremely important to that quest. So much, I personally believe, of the misunderstandings we often have is just for a lack of knowledge. So having started there with my background, I started asking what can be done now. So I'll start with my first question, Madam Chair. Do I need to ask one question like we normally do, or are we a little...
There are several, excuse me, yeah, thank you. There are some other individuals who also want to speak. I was hoping we would be out probably about 2:30, but it doesn't appear like that's going to happen. But however, there are, if you can ask one question, that'd be good. But your buttons, even if you push this to speak button, it is not working. The technology is not working here. And so you, if you could maybe hold your hand up or just say your name and then speak, because I have no way of knowing.
Well, I went to law school, so any question has two parts.
Oh. So you want to be practicing in here today, huh? Okay, let's move forward. And so
I'll be as brief
All
as
right.
I can.
Thank you. Okay.
Has there been, and perhaps, I don't know if you can answer this question or the person on the task force, has there been a ask for the information with respect to how the university wants to go forward in terms of releasing information?
That question is for me, or is that for you?
If you have information.
No, she wanted to know if you had asked. No, we haven't asked for any information from any of the universities.
I know we have not.
Yet.
I don't know where the task force is, and I don't know what she's done.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Well, I can tell you from a reporting perspective that I have asked for more information about details of meetings, progression from those meetings, where the task force is at this day, since starting their meetings in April and making decisions, or even how they plan to approach the research that I know is very deep and detailed and takes a lot of time to organize and actually do. And so I have reached out to the task force to ask about those things. I did receive a statement that I'm not going to read here, but you'll hear more about it in my reporting. But yeah, I have at this juncture, I have no knowledge on any sort of decisions that have been made by the task force for information that will be released about how they specifically, I want to be clear, like specifically plan to conduct the research. Just an aside here, because I don't want to overlook this, but I know you had spoken about like where you are in the process right now, and one of the questions that I have been hearing a lot from people who have been impacted by this is wondering why they haven't been involved yet in the process. I know there's a process to what you all are doing, so I respect that. But speaking on behalf of the residents, I think they would like to know how they will be involved in it from a seat at the table perspective, because that is, I think, what most people are seeking. So that's where I'm at in terms of accessing the information and understanding what will be revealed and how things will be updated.
All right, Ms. Kellam, Delegate Kamara. And then after that, we have Dr. Fleming, and then followed by Senator Morrison.
My hope is that since we have a new university president, that he also has a new attitude with respect to how we can get information. The last part of my question has to do with whether your research included any valuation of the businesses that were removed, as well as the values of the home, both at the time that it was taken, as well as present day value.
Yes, so our research centered around how the properties were valued by the entities that were seeking to acquire those properties. I'm going to be honest, because the archival records are a little bit scarce in some cases when it comes to actually property values, I do think that from my experience researching this, those would probably be a little bit more difficult to attain versus what the properties are valued at during the period of the takings. And for an example, I gave the stat that in Newport News, the property owners were given 20% less of what their properties were valued. We know that because in the city council minutes, it showed 3 separate appraisals. One that was extremely low based on outdated real estate appraiser history in Newport News. I think right before it merged with Warwick, they used some outdated data from that particular period. Then the families were so upset about that, they forced the council members to go back to the drawing board, and they hired an independent appraiser, which valued the properties at that time. I think it was like $360,000 plus for the total taking. So the first appraisal was $185,000 for all of those properties. Then it was an independent appraiser who said $363,000. And then the city did not feel like that was a reasonable amount to pay. So they got a separate appraiser from the city assessor's office, and that lowered it by, I believe, somewhere around another $100,000. So that was where we got the 20% less than what their properties were valued, because the appraisal that they decided to go with in that regard was not by the independent appraiser.
Thank you. I apologize, Dr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. some of my questions have been answered, but I'm just kind of curious. First of all, great presentation. I loved every bit of it. I love history. And some of the stuff I didn't even know. I guess my only question is, are there any other entities or how high is this going up or who's looking into it? Because this is a serious issue. I mean, is it getting any attention at higher levels?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your question.
No, you're fine. That's why I want to know, because this is so important. I just want to know, is it getting any attention? Because this to me is very important, especially being a product of Norfolk.
Yeah,
because I had no idea Christopher Newport did all that. My daughter went there, so, so that's what I want to know, is how high is the attention is getting from different entities or whatever.
For the specific reporting, it's gotten a lot of attention. The issue in general has a lot of focus on it as well. There are other colleges. I didn't mention this in my presentation, but the expert that I shared with you at the last slide, Devarian Baldwin, he is the person that will be the best to ask about this, because he is heavily involved in communities that have been displaced by Black and brown communities that have been displaced by colleges and universities across the country. He does a lot of work in those communities seeking reparative justice, and that has seen a wide range of approaches, from scholarships to preserving some remaining homes historically. There are a lot of different ways to address that, but I'm not the expert on that. I think he is, and I think he'd be great to talk to about that. So that kind of speaks to this being a national issue, right? It's not just a Virginia issue. It is a national issue, but Virginia residents were impacted by it.
Thank you, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting to, start thinking about the complexity of these issues. And one of the things that's occurred to me, and as you know, Madam Chair, here in the legislature, the data is very, very important, but also the story is very important to put things in context. And I'm wondering whether it will be possible to find similarly situated white families and how they were treated. And, as a comparative thing, not only to validate the data, but at the same time to show the intentionality, that took place in these circumstances. And it will be probably our task to come up with a methodology to determine. It's one thing to determine the loss of wealth from something that happened a few weeks ago versus something that happened in 1870, and coming up with methodologies to determine what that is will be a complicated task. But thank you for bringing this information, to us today. The only experience I've had with this is I grew up in an 1890s elementary school. And across the street from me was land owned by African-American families that had been given to them, granted to them in George Washington's will, in Fairfax County. And today it's several office buildings for medical personnel adjacent to Inova Fairfax Hospital. And it would be interesting, just to my own curiosity, to check to see how those families were treated in that circumstances, because I would assume that it happens much more than just with public institutions of higher learning.
You're absolutely right, Senator. Absolutely right. And there are many stories to be told. Did anyone else need to speak on the front? Oh, okay. Yes, I'm sorry. Apologies.
Thank you again for your thoughtful presentation. I was actually walking over here explaining to a colleague that I had read some research many months ago on this topic that I felt so compelling, and it was your research. So thank you again for being here. I did have one particular question in the thoroughness of the work that you've done, and whether or not you've explored like the college-going rates of the communities that were impacted, or the outcomes of students of the communities in which the campus expansions have happened, right? And that's not to suggest for a moment that one act cancels out the other, for sure. But I do wonder, when we talk about the primary purpose of public higher education is to improve the lives of communities and states and the global workforce. And I'm wondering, if you looked at things like, enrollment rates and achievement rates and postgraduate earnings, things that I would hope that we would see some of the impacted communities, benefit from. But the question is on, and again, one doesn't cancel out the other, but I'm wondering if your research explored that, or if there's an opportunity for some of that to come alive in this body.
Yes, absolutely. So in the presentation, I have a QR code that links you to the entire investigation. In one of our final stories that we investigated, and again, this is just because we use the college as a case study, not here to pick on one university or the other, but the numbers don't lie though. So with the Newport News community as a case study example, right, in our reporting, we found that most of the students in that area do not even attend that college. Yep. That most of the students that attend that college are from this area of Virginia, Northern Virginia. And so, that kind of just speaks to what you were asking about, which is what are the attendance rates? What are the success rates? Well, those kind of go hand in hand, attending college and then being successful from attending college. But when you look at the actual access to the college, that says a lot about what the success is of the people who sacrifice their homes for that university.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Deputy Kent. Anyone else? Any other commission? Yes, Dr. Nubia Alexander.
Thank you. I have one other comment. As you're looking at the financial side, the financial impact that this had, I wonder if you've looked at, because we know that the FHA in that time frame did not provide any support to develop African American suburban communities. That came from African Americans, while for whites it came from the federal and state governments. And so I was wondering if there was any projection about, for those who were trying to develop communities, because we had a lot of those situations in Norfolk. William T. Mason Sr. was significantly and financially harmed because of these actions. He was trying to develop a large suburban community for African Americans in the Ingleside area and was stopped using eminent domain or the threat of it to sell his property. And so if I don't know if you've projected what were the lost earnings, because we talk a lot about, well, how was this property assessed? But we know that the assessments, generally speaking, were already discriminatory towards African Americans. So it's not just they were paid 20% less, but the assessments were 20% less as well, or at least some form of percentage less. And so have you thought about what the projection would have been if they had been allowed to develop the property and selling that property to others, what would have been the loss of income?
Right. So that's a really great question. So we did look at least, and we knew that the families in Newport News, there was a specific family, the Johnson family, that actually was seeking, the example you give of Mason, to develop property and to subdivide 30 acres into lots for other families to move into. And the research shows that at that time, whether they were giving a discount to other Black families or not, those lots were selling for maybe somewhere around $25,000 to $35,000 to $5,000, right, for a lot. And so when you think about having 30 lots worth that amount of money, at the low end, that's probably somewhere around 100,000 or more. And you think about the rate of inflation, you can do the math and you'll see that it was probably somewhere around $1 million more, right? Millions maybe of dollars that had this been able to be subdivided. And I also believe there was an effort to do this as a collective entity, right? Then that would have been ownership of a community, that Black people would have been owning their own communities and also profiting for that, and that could have been worth millions today.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for Ms. Brandi for your presentation. Certainly everything resonated, and simply because I represent Lamberts Point and Old Dominion University and spent 18 years teaching at ODU and have family growing up in that area who have been displaced, as well as currently living in Ingleside. So all of these things resonate very prominent for me. So I pulled out a couple of things of particularly some of the words that I've heard of collective systemic dismantling with local government, planning departments, planning commissions. And then also looking at the research barriers, the FOIA laws, the financial impact. And so I think, because we have a local task force that's really digging in and being very intentional about collecting all the information, and we have lots of brains on this commission who have also done the work. I think, we need to approach the next meeting about what is the commission's approach to this. And so to delve out a very intentional mapping. And a lot of times with commissions, we do have interim reports where we kind of alert the General Assembly about these overarching things. And basically, its displacement is uprooting of Black communities within the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so what are those implications, and what is it that we can do now? I know Dr. Cassandra Newby-Alexander says, what is it that we can do now? What is defined as reparative justice? What does that look like? What is the restorative justice? What does that look like? And what is it that we can do now? Is it legislation that impedes planning and zoning? Is it legislation that, that impacts FOIA? And what is it that we can do as far as, reparations? And so I think we should come back to the next meeting, to gather up all of our information, because there's a lot that I still need to digest and still need to learn. And then also learning from my colleagues here on the commission that we come up with a map of how we're going to intentionally tackle this so that we're not repeating the same function as the local task force. And so we already have you and several other folks who have done that work. And we don't want to get into the weeds of looking at whether there's a benefit of uprooting Black people from their neighborhoods. We don't want to get into outliers or the root go away from the mission of this particular commission. And so I move that, we go to the next meeting with a plan of action of pulling together a map or a work plan of intention and plan to come up with an interim report to the General Assembly. Most of the time, we have a deadline of the end of November, simply that we have to put in some of our legislative drafts by that date so that we could, make sure that we put in some things of what we can do now and continue this on within, the next year.
Okay.
I was going to say I'd like to second it, but I'd like to add.
Okay. Yes, you may, Delegate Kamara.
I think implicit in what Delegate Anthony is saying is that we're able to get some existing information that's outside of what our researcher has, including the task force, as well as what the university current leaders, are they willing to speak with us and help us to have this conversation? So I'd like for that to be part of the strategy, and I thank the delegate for bringing the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate Anthony. We'll take a vote on in terms of the approach. One of the things that I think it is absolutely, we need a plan of action. And I think that the next meeting, we will use that time to address that, the procedurally, where do we go from here? And that part in terms of the universities, that will come. the universe. There are some of them that I know definitely will talk with us. There are others that we might need to use a different type of approach. But I don't assume that the General Assembly is coming before you asking for information from the universities. I would expect everyone to cooperate. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. But I think the plan of action certainly would help us to move to the next place. The strategies, the approaches that we're going to use, I certainly would like to have an opportunity to have some in-depth discussion with the vice chair of the meeting, and also hopefully the other individuals who are away today, that they will also be here for the next meeting. So it is, there's a lot of work ahead of us. But I think this is for those families that were harmed, I can't think of anything more noble that we could be doing while seated in these positions than to try to look at ways, again, reparative justice, restorative justice, but to say, we hear you. And we thank you so much for your contribution and the presentation today. We do still have to, and we're going to take, well, I don't know, Madam Clerk, do we need a vote on, I don't think we need a vote on, but there was a motion that you made. So, okay, a motion has been made and a friendly amendment. Is that what you're doing?
What would you like?
Or would you accept the friendly amendment? Well, a motion has been made, and you just want to add to her motion, basically, about, yeah, okay. Yes. Can we restate the motion? Yes, can you, it was, yeah.
Okay, I think what I wanted to do is, as we have gathered the information here, that I motion that we adjourn, and then the next meeting, that we use that next meeting to come up with a mapping or an intentional work plan for this particular commission.
Okay, all right, the motion has been made and properly second. All in favor? Say aye. Okay, and so we'll make certain that some things that, information will come out, will go before the next meeting as we, in the minutes, but also giving you some sort of direction as to where we go from here. We do need to open for public comment if there are any comments from the public at this time. Okay, there are no comments from the public. And so again, thank you so much, Ms. Kellam. We do appreciate all that you have shared with us, and you made our work much harder. Thank you. So at this time, could I have a motion for the closing of this meeting, adjournment? Okay, motion has been made to adjourn. There are no one here who's opposing, right? All right, thank you. Thank you all so much for being here.